Namaskar and welcome to this series on Hindustani classical music with me, Dr. Kalyani Bondre. In today's episode, we are going to understand the concept of Thaat in Hindustani classical music. Different ragas are classified in categories according to the nature of sur or musical notes that they use. This classification is known as Thaat. In my previous video, I have explained the 7 musical frequencies or what we call as the musical notes, sa re ga ma pa dha ni, sa pa which are called achal sur, re ga dha ni which have their Komal variants, and ma which has its Tivra variant. So in all we know that in any given saptak, which is a set of 7 musical notes, there are 12 frequencies. The first 7, sa re ga ma pa dha ni plus re ga dha ni in their Komal format and ma in its Tivra variant. Similarly, in my previous videos, I have also explained the concept of a Raag and how a Raag uses a certain set of these 12 frequencies which are there. In case you've missed watching those videos, the links of those videos are given in the description box below. Now moving to the concept of Thaat, let me first mention here that a Thaat is a purely theoretical concept. A Thaat is never performed or sung. Like I said in the beginning, it is a classification of ragas into different categories. The Thaat system is the contribution of the legendary, revered musicologist Pandit Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande. As we all know, that Hindustani classical music was largely an oral tradition with very little documentation or published work in this area. Pandit Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande is credited with having written the first modern treatise on Hindustani classical music. He is also credited with creating a notation system for Hindustani classical music, because of which today we can document ragas, bandishes based on the musical notation. Pandit Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande travelled the length and breadth of the country in the early part of the 20th century, had discussions with ustads and pandits across the country, collected, learned and composed a lot of different bandishes, and finally all of this culminated in the publication of his magnum opus called Hindustani Sangeet Paddhati, which is spread over several volumes. Pandit Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande classified ragas into 10 categories based on the musical notes that these ragas use, thereby developing a parent scale which is called a Thaat. I will give you the example of 2 Thaats in today's episode, and I will discuss the remaining 8 Thaats in the subsequent episodes. So let us first take the example of Bilawal Thaat. When a rag uses all Shuddh Swar or natural original frequencies, then it is said to be belonging to the Bilawal Thaat. So the Bilawal Thaat is like this: sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa. Now as you saw what I just sang, the notes, the 7 notes that I sang were all in their natural frequencies or what we call as the Shuddha Swar. Now those ragas which use all Shuddha Swar in their Aroha and Avroha, or the ascent and descent are called ragas belonging to the Bilawal Thaat. For example, Raag Durga. Raag Durga uses the notes sa, re, ma, pa, dha, sa. Sa, pa anyway are achal. Re, ma and dha are in their Shuddh format, which means that Raag Durga belongs to the Bilawal Thaat. Sa, re, ma, pa, dha, sa. Sa, dha, pa, ma, re, sa. Another Raag, Hansadvani, uses the notes sa, re, ga, pa, ni, sa. Again, sa, pa being achal, re, ga and ni are in their Shuddh or natural variant. Sa, re, ga, pa, ni, sa. Sa, ni, pa, ga, re, sa. Another example is that of Raag Bhinna Shadja, which uses the notes sa, ga, ma, dha, ni. In this scale, sa is anyway achal, pa is skipped, re is skipped. Ga, ma, dha and ni are in their Shuddha variants. Sa, ga, ma, dha, ni, sa. Sa, ni, dha, ma, ga, sa. The next example which I am going to discuss in today's episode is Kalyan Thaat. Kalyan Thaat uses the Tivrama and all other notes in their Shuddha or natural variants. So when a Raag has the Tivrama and all other Swaras Shuddha, then it is supposed to be belonging to the Kalyan Thaat. So Kalyan Thaat goes like this. Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni, sa. An example of a Raag belonging to the Kalyan Thaat is Yaman, the very popular Raag Yaman, which incidentally is also called Kalyan, from where this Thaat derives its name. Raag Yaman goes like this. Ni, re, ga, ma, dha, ni, sa. Sa, ni, dha, pa, ma, ga, re, sa. So as you saw in the Aroha and Avroha of Raag Yaman, I sang all other notes in their Shuddha variant and ma in its Tivra variant. Another example is Raag Maru Bihag, which goes like this. Sa, ga, ma, pa, ni, sa. So in the ascent, re and dha are skipped. All others are Shuddha Swar. Sa, pa anyway are achal. Sa, ga, ma, pa, ni, sa. Sa, ni, dha, pa, ma, ga, re, sa. Now, having given you these examples, I am sure you have understood the concept of a Thaat. But the question now which emerges is, what is the difference between a Thaat and a Raag? Because both seem to be subsets of the 12 musical frequencies. So it is natural to wonder how a Thaat differs from a Raag. So let me elaborate on this point. First and foremost, a Thaat is only a theoretical concept. It is never performed, it is never sung, and it is never presented in front of an audience. It is only for the understanding of the students of music that the Thaat system has been created in order to classify ragas into different categories. Classification is a very common phenomenon in most sciences, almost all sciences, and this being Hindustani Shastriya Sangeet. There's a Shastra, there's a science, and naturally a classification which follows. Secondly, a Thaat has all 7 notes always, whereas a Raag can have a minimum of 5 notes, but it can have more also. Similarly, it can have a different number of notes in the ascent and a different number of notes in the descent. For example, you may have a Raag which has 6 notes in the ascent and 7 notes in the descent. Another distinguishing feature is that a Thaat only has an Aroha, whereas a Raag essentially has an Aroha and an Avroha, ascent and descent. A Raag belongs to a Thaat, and as a result of that, in one Thaat there can be many Ragas. Similarly, a Raag always creates a mood. It conveys certain feelings. A Thaat, on the other hand, is just a musical scale which doesn't create any mood. Another characteristic or point of distinction between a Raag and a Thaat is that a Thaat has no chalan. Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, ni are always in the same order. Being a parent scale, it is only a point of reference, whereas a Raag always has a chalan. And an Aroha may have notes in a different order also, which we call a Vakra chalan. For example, the Raag Alhaiya Bilawal uses the notes Sa, Ga, Re, Ga, Pa. Now you see here, this is a Vakra chalan where Ga precedes Re. Sa, Ga, Re, Ga, Pa. Whereas a Thaat will have the 7 notes always in the same order, Sa, Re, Ga, Ma, Pa, Dha, Ni. Similarly, a Raag has a Vadi Swar and a Samvadi Swar, which also I have discussed in my previous video. So it means that in a Raag, not all notes are of equal importance. There is one note which is the Vadi Sur, which is the maximum important note in a Raag. And you have the Samvadi Sur, which is the second most important Sur in the Raag. And other Surs may not have that much importance, meaning that those may not be repeated so many times, or you may not land on those notes, or you may not hold those notes. Whereas in a Thaat, all 7 notes have equal importance, so there is no Vadi Sur and there is no Samvadi Sur. The canvas of Hindustani classical music is so vast that one cannot really say that all possible ragas or each and every rag will get classified in one or the other of these 10 Thaats. There may be exceptions. There may be ragas which do not really fall in any of these 10 Thaats because of the combination of Shuddh, Komal and Tivra Swar that they use. Nevertheless, the Thaat system does give the student of Hindustani classical music a very sound understanding of the various categories or various types of ragas based on the musical notes that they use. Today we have understood the basic concept of Thaat and how a Thaat is different from a Raag, and I have given examples of 2 out of the 10 Thaats. We have discussed today Bilawal Thaat and Kalyani Thaat. I will come back with the remaining Thaats in my upcoming videos. Till then, stay tuned. Namaskar.